Hi, in this video, I'm going to talk about the U.S. federal tax law. It's an overview. First, how tax cases move through the judicial system. First, you understand is Congress passes the tax law. Executive branch of the federal government enforces and interprets. Right? And the judicial branch that ultimately determine whether the executive branch interpretation is correct. So then this provides yet another source of the tax law court decisions. So when you do research on some tax law, so you can research some court decisions then to find the answer. Internal Revenue Code, IRC, and the Treasury regulations. So ultimately, all the federal tax authority begin with the Constitution and the Congress. Congress delegate rulemaking authority to the U.S. Department of the Treasury. The U.S. Department of the Treasury is responsible for enforcing the Internal Revenue Code. Treasury regulations are department's official interpretation of the Internal Revenue Code's IRC. Next to the code itself, Treasury regulations are the highest source of the authority in matter of the federal income tax law. The Internal Revenue Service, which is IRS, reports to the Secretary of the Treasury, which is Janet Yellen. She is the head of the United States Department of the Treasury. The courts for the tax cases. Before litigation a case in court, taxpayer must have exhausted the administrative remedies available to him or to her with the IRS. All the litigations begin in the court of the original jurisdiction. Trial courts, including tax court, U.S. District Court, and the U.S. Claims Court. Notice that the taxpayer may elect anyone and only one of these three courts to hear the case. So if you are not satisfied with the judgment by the trial court, you can appeal to U.S. Court Appeals, U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. Then the final appeal, you can choose the Supreme Court. Internal Revenue Code, IRC. So after the code itself, the hierarchy of the authoritative sources published by the IRS is as following. Regulations. Those are legislative regulation, interpretive regulations, procedure regulations. Then after that, you have a revenue ruling, revenue procedures. Those you can find on the Internal Revenue Bulletin. So those are basically kind of interpretation for the IRC. Then you have a private letter ruling. Technical advice memorandum. Private letter ruling. So they basically private letter ruling. They basically have the it's for individual taxpayers. So can be expensive from $5,000 to $50,000 if you require a private letter ruling. So for private letter ruling, they usually coming with a series of the number like this: 2021 38 10. 2021 is the year ruling was issued. 38 is the 38th week of the issuance. Then 10 is the number out of the ruling issued that week. Then after that, you have a notification and announcement. So those are just, temporary notice. So it's nothing is like law. Then you have a common tax doctrines, step transaction doctrine. Then you have a sham, which is fake. Transaction doctrine, substance over form doctrine, reallocation of the income doctrine, then constructive receipt doctrine, assignment of the income doctrine, this is fruit of the tree, forgiveness debt doctrine, the tax benefit rules, the unreasonable compensation rules, ownership attribute rules, Harvey losses rules. Then tax treaties. The law contains in the tax treaties represent another component of the statutory laws. Tax treaties are agreements between the United States and the government of the other country that provide the rules of the governing the taxation resident of one country by another. For example, the tax treaties between United States and France indicate how the French government tax U.S. citizens reside in the France and vice versa. Tax treaties as law have the same authority as laws contained in the code. In fact, the treaties provision normally take precedence over the contained in the code. That is the purpose of the federal tax law. There are three primary objectives served by the federal tax law: raising revenue, economic growth and development, price stability. In recent decades, federal tax law has evolved to serve the threefold purpose. It's like raising revenue for the federal government, redistribute wealth to achieve social objective, managing economic growth. So tax penalties. Tax penalty, you have a criminal fraud, is tax evasion, which is illegal. You can have a lots of fines and imprisonment or both. Civil fraud is 75% of the portion tax underpayment attributed to the fraud. Negligent penalty is 20% of the portion of the underpayment attributed to the negligent. Fail to file is 5% per month or partial month, which means you you do 35 days, then you still count as 2 months. So 5% per month up to 25%, which is the amount you are not paying. So if more than 60 days, you have a minimum penalty is 435, also 100% of the unpaid tax. So whichever is larger, right? Failure to pay is 0.05% per month, then up to 25%. And they say the failure to pay penalty is reduced by the failure to pay. So basically, you failure to file. If you have both failure to file, failure to pay, so you can just do failure to file. Then ignore the failure to pay. Underpayment penalty, then basically you have interest on it. Tax audit. There are 3 types tax audit performed by IRS. A correspondence audit, which is usually performed through the mail because the distributed tax issue is a minor. Then Second is office audit, which is usually restricted in a scope of specific items and performing at the IRS office by the office auditor. A field audit, which is an examination numerous items, is usually performed on the premise of the taxpayer by the revenue agent. The statutory of the limitation tax audit. So taxpayers have rights. After a statutory of limitation has passed, except the case of the fraud, the IRS cannot audit a return 3 years from the filing date of the return or due date if later. 6 years if 25% gross income is unreported. No statutory limitation for failure to file or if fraudulent return is filed. Estimated tax. Individual with a previous year AGI is $150,000 and less is the lesser 90% of their current tax liability or 100% of their tax for the prior years. Individual with a previous AGI is more than $150,000, so it's lesser 90% of their current year's tax liability or 110% of their tax for the prior tax year. IRS recognize the representative. So basically, who can represent taxpayers in front of IRS? You have tax attorneys, CPAs, enroll agent, enroll actuary. So they actually do have to use a power of attorney. It's a written authorization for the individual to act on another's behalf.